Howdy folks, how y'all doing today? Hope you guys are all staying safe and enjoying the warmer weather, well at least in North America. Today we are going to talk about not headphones, which I've got all over the place here. We've got some Fearless S8F, we've got a couple Sonys back there, we've got some Knaus Pros, got some what is these, BGVP DM7s, DM6, Voyager 3s, got some Tone King BL1 planner, got some blondes, and over yonder we got a box full of goodies. Zoom in on that guy. Yeah, there's a bunch of like medium to low end sets in there. Got to review a bunch of those, but yeah, they're there. And then over here, this is what we're talking about today. Op amps, operational amplifiers. And some of you might be going, what? What the heck is that? Why are those a bunch of chip-looking things? And what are we talking about here? So, I'm actually going to talk, this review is about, let me go back over to here. I'll zoom in here a little bit. Let's get these out of the way. This is the Burson V6 Vivid OpAmp. I believe these run like between $70 and $90 depending on where you get it. This is the OpAmp. Let me just pull it out here. The screws are for my little unit over here, the X Duo, and I just pulled them out so I could get that ready. But this is the OpAmp. And Burson has a very nice packaging there. Cool. Alright, so we've got this little bad boy here. So this is the Burson V6 Vivid, which is I think their latest generation of operational amplifiers. And then for some comparisons, we have this here. We have, see, maybe you can see the size difference there a little bit. So these things right here are blanks to put on surface mount operational amplifiers. So if you're going to buy amplifiers that are made for circuit boards, in other words, well, they're made for people to create circuit boards with. Generally these days they want to be small and they want to be surface mounted, such as this thing. This is a Texas Instruments OPA 1612 operational amplifier. Then we got this one, which is it's really hard to, well, actually that's a blank. I just stuck some pins on it, so you get these little pin guys. You solder them into this little package here, and then you can mount the amplifier right on top of that. So zoom in just a little bit here. Let's see. Yeah, good enough. So anyway, that's kind of what that looks like. So you got to mount your little chip on there, and so I do soldering, and I can put these together. Let's see, the OPA 1612 came pre-assembled, and this came in the X Duo. This one I just put together myself. This is and there's a little wire on it because anyway, this is a OPA, I believe that's a 2228, yeah. Texas Instruments OPA 2228. And then the socket I was trying to stick it in was too small, like they had components around it, so I shaved off the edge, which then cut off some circuits, and then I had to reroute the circuit with that little jumper wire. Don't worry about that, it's ugly, but it works. Then we have this one, which is a OPA, 2227. So I got a 2227 and 2228, these guys. Now, Critical, the famed reviewer, I just asked him, hey man, what kind of op amps do you like? And he picked this guy. So the 2227, so hey, let's get that. Then the 2228, I read some stuff online saying, now the difference between these two is the 2227 is for lower impedance, and this one is for much higher impedance. Say, I think it's over 10,000 ohms, something like that. But this one should work in any circuit, and in fact I've stuck both of these, well, all of these operational amplifiers in my devices, and they all work fine. And then this one is This is a call it PDIP, I think is what it is. It's just basically a chip with the pins already in it, right? So you just pop this into your device, usually if it's got a socket. This is a OPA, God, let me see if I can read it. 2134 PA, 2134. So this is recommended by a friend of mine. He liked it, so I said, yeah, let's get that. So just to let you know some pricing. Oh, and by the way, let's go over to this real quick. This is what's in here right now. So this is the OpAmp socket in my X-Duo 05 Plus. And you might see that this is an operational amplifier, the chip right here. This is a Muse 02. JRC, I believe, is the company, makes it Muse 02. I absolutely adore this op-amp. But this type of socket arrangement, let me just pull this out. Let's see. There you go. And of course, you want to do this with no power, and it is turned off. But so this socket allows you to put in one stereo, basically a two-channel operational amplifier, or two monos. And so that's really handy. Now, you might notice that, let's see if I can point to it, this little guy right here, these little green wires, this capacitor that's connected to those was in the way, and so when you had in, like basically the Burson, for instance, when I'd stick that in there, I'd have to stick a bunch of like height extenders on this, which just totally sucks. So I moved the capacitor off to the side so I could just, you know, basically work with it easier. So you might say, well, okay, that's cool. You got a chip, you got things to put it in. What do you do? So these operational amplifiers are always keyed, meaning that they will show you how they go in. And then if you can see in here, yeah, okay, so there's like a little divot in this little white line right next to this side of the sockets, little divot right here. And that indicates that this is going to be the pin 1 side. And then on the operational amplifier, we have a divot indicating pin 1. So basically, you just match them divots and you stick that in there. So this goes like, let's see if I can do it. Yeah, about that. And then you just shove her in. And there we go. We have installed a Burson V6 Vivid operational amplifier in our X-Duo. Just as easy as that, although with that capacitor there, that wouldn't have fit at all. Half the fun of this sort of like do-it-yourself stuff is taking stuff apart, man, moving stuff around, changing components. That's really the joy of this stuff. So let's talk about the sound quality, which is definitely going to be very dependent on the circuit you stick an operational amplifier in. So I can't say for certain that, like, for instance, this Burson is going to be for sure much better than this Muse 02. But I can tell you for sure that in this device, it sounds better, right? Although I should say these are kind of bad examples. Both of these have very special characteristics. I like both of them a lot for different reasons. And I don't want to say that one is better than the other necessarily, but for specific reasons, yeah, one is better than the other. But in any case, comparing those two to the Texas Instruments, that's the OPA 2228, 2227, and OPA 1612. And I should mention that this 1612 right here, this unassuming looking little tiny chip, is Texas Instruments' very top of the line audiophile operational amplifier, which is interesting. It's interesting in the aspect that I don't like it, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, it's not bad, but then you compare it to, like, you know, these two guys up here, and it's, well, not so great. So I just kind of wanted to go over some of this stuff. Just this thing is a height riser, or it just raises up your op amp, so you could stick this in your socket and pull it up a little bit. So maybe if you got something next to it, you can fit it in there better. These things are blanks that you can get off of Amazon for, like, you know, like $5 a blank or something, and this will get you. But basically, they convert a surface mount chip into a PDIP, which is a chip with pins that you can stick in something. And this is just a different type of one. was mostly trying to get small ones, then I ended up just moving the capacitor here, so whatever. That's what those look like. And then you got these little break-off pins that you can build things with or extend things or something like that. Cool. So what I might actually try and do with this specifically, so inside of this Burson is, zoom in just a little bit. Probably can't see much in here, but yeah, you can see something. So it's got two circuit boards in here, right? And well, this is the equivalent of this, right? But this is two circuit boards. So the advantage of having a much larger op-amp package is that they can put a lot more components on there, say capacitors, resistors, diodes, blah, blah, blah. They can do a lot more with a bigger package than they can do with one of these guys. But of course it gets bigger. And so what I might try and do with this guy is actually take the plastic packaging off and then extend or pull the two boards out, like, you know, seal them off so they can't touch anything, and then like lay them flat into the X Duo. I think I can fit them in there right in this area right in here if I just lay it flat and put some extenders. So I might try and do that. It's pretty cool. But as is, yeah, this isn't going to be very portable. You just want to leave it on a desk. So yeah, cool. All right, so let me, well, I'll just leave it like that and just eye candy it up a little bit. Okay. So also, just to let you guys know, I've got this other thing, which is a Acme MF01, and it's really cool because it's such a small little portable device. Let me just do this here. And right in there, right on the upper side there, you might see a little socket. Now that's just a stereo op-amp socket, and also it's very tight in there, so you're not going to be able to fit like a Burson or any of that stuff. And in fact, these are even big. You pretty much need like the tiniest one, the tiniest little adapters you can find. This one does fit that. But in fact, this Acme came with the Muse 02. Also prices, let me just talk about that real quick. So this device was like about $100. And it comes with turns out is a $40 op-amp. Which is very expensive for op-amps, although you would say very expensive, but then you get to the Burson, that's another level up in expense. So this is maybe $70 to $90, and then this guy is about, say, $30 to $40. Also, I should mention that there's a lot of knockoffs of these Muses on eBay for cheap. Don't get them. They are not right. You do need to pay about $30, 30 plus to get one of these. Whereas the 1612, the Texas Instruments 1612 is, I want to say maybe like $5 if you just buy one. If you buy them in bulk, they're a lot cheaper. It's like maybe $5. These guys are maybe like, you know, $2.50, $3. These guys are really cheap, and I don't actually know of any of the small surface mount op amps that are actually expensive at all. They're all reasonable. But they like to sell these in bulk, so you kind of have to pay a little bit more, $5 instead of $1, whatever. Okay, sound quality, sound. Now it took me a hell of a long time to figure all this out. Now, I used multiple headphones, well, these two devices, although I can't put the Burson in this, so really I'm only testing the Burson in this X Duo, but the X Duo sounds fantastic, and I should say it points out differences in op-amps very distinctly. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean one better than another, but it may sound better in this particular circuit. It is what it is. Okay, so I did try all of the headphones I own through this Burson. It's taken me like, geez, almost a month now to kind of go through everything and listen for a couple hours a piece, you know, something like that. What can I say? All right, so let's start with, in terms of the X Duo, this guy has 1 watt of power, which is a lot for a portable device. And what the reason I'm talking about that is because there are some op amps that cannot deal with high gain. So that on this thing, you put this up to high gain like so, and then you got a bass boost here, and then this thing is for high impedance, but headphones. But the point I'm trying to get to is that this op amp does not crumble under the load of this X Duo. You could stick this thing all the way up on everything. Oops. So you can stick the boost all the way up, the bass all the way up, bass boost, and the gain all the way up, and crank this sucker all the way to max, and this op amp does not cry. It doesn't distort. It just is clean, sweet, and very powerful. That's an advantage. I want to say that, let's see which one, this guy, I'm going to forget the names of these real quick. 2134. This 2134, you stick this into this X Duo, stick it all on high gain and all that, boost it up, and it'll actually go into protect mode, so it just shuts itself off. So I assume this op amp can't take that amount of power or something. Is that better or worse? Well, I mean, the whole point of a high-powered device like this is to power some high-powered headphones with high impedance, maybe over-the-head cans. So, you know, it makes sense to me, right? You do need something like this. Sound quality. So this is quite an interesting thing to pin down, and this X Duo does show it off well. So let's start with the stock operational amplifier. That'll maybe give you some comparisons. So metal tracks, high volume, I should say high compression metal tracks, especially like radio friendly types. With this OPA 1612, the Texas Instruments, which is their highest, toppest, most ultra operational amplifier they have. And by the way, I should say many high-end headphone amps use this, or a couple of these, or many of these. So it's interesting. Anyways, when I get to really complex music with a lot of compression, and also move the volume level of this guy up, we're talking loud levels. This thing, now I don't know if it's just linear, it's producing the sound very linearly. It could be, I think it is. According to the data sheets, it should be. It has like distortion that's hard even to measure. But it loses its butt a little bit. It loses track of the musicality of the music when you get a really complex, compressed, high distortion type metal track. I had a couple, let me see if I could remember. Yeah, so this is a Perfect Circle Brenna, right? And at the beginning of that track, there is, this was about a week ago I listened to it, so we'll just say this. At the beginning of that track, there's a lot of complex dynamics, vocals, and this thing makes me very unhappy listening to the beginning of that track. It loses, especially the louder you get, it loses the sound layers. The stage starts to collapse. All the various instruments start to meld together, and then it just becomes sort of chaotic. It doesn't sound musical in that respect. A good example of something that I do hear as being musical, the more you turn it up and the more complex music gets, is actually a tube amplifier. I don't have one in handy here, but I've heard some, and I don't know what's happening exactly, but the more complex music with a tube amp, it seems like they just sort of clean it up and they make it more musical. Well, I hear, okay, so especially the Muse 02, this one is much more similar to a tube amp. In other words, much more colored than the Burson. As a result of, like, that's kind of what I'm talking about, more complex passages with huge dynamics. This does a really good job with making musical enjoyment out of that type of a track. And that's not to say that the Burson is worse. It is not worse. It is different. And so the difference between, say, like the Burson and the Muse, which, by the way, I should mention, the Muse is definitely my favorite op amp ever. All these Texas Instruments are just like, they're nice to try, but I ended up not liking any of them. They work, they sound okay, but then you A/B compare with a bunch of tracks, and it's just like, no, these don't have any musicality to them. They sound like you're playing your music through a computer. That doesn't make any sense, really, but you see what I mean? It's just, there's no organicness to these. They have a hard edge, a hard digital edge to them. Excellent extension. Obviously, they go all the way up into treble and bass as much as you ever want, but the musicality is not what I would like out of these. Moving on. So, well, if I remember any good points of these TIs, I'll bring them out, Texas Instruments, but let's talk about these two, because these basically are my two babies. So I have a small mixing studio, just to do my own stuff, and I do friends' music mixing too. Nothing major. But so I have been listening to some of my mixes through this setup, using digital in to this and then just analog out to my studio monitors. And what I found is really interesting. So the Muse has a warm bottom end. It has maybe not as much high-end treble extension. We're talking about versus these two. Plenty of treble, but just not quite as much high-end as extension. It has, I want to say, I swear it's got some even harmonics going on, which, you know, that's definitely a distortion type effect, but it just sounds like it to me. This thing sounds really similar to a tube amp. Like, I've talked to a couple people and it's like, maybe I don't want to go all the way, but it's like 50% of the magic of a tube amp just in this little chip. And the musicality of this is just outstanding. It's just phenomenal. But the difference between these two is, so this, I'm talking about musical wonderfulness, just really nice enjoyment. Maybe not quite the extension that, like, say, an audiophile OCD person might want, I think. But for me, this is just amazing. But so the difference between this and this would be, this one is way more studio. The Burson V6 is much more studio reference. Okay, so it is extended in both directions, bass, treble perfectly. It has perfect control over dynamics, gain levels. The louder you get this, well, especially the X Duo, it doesn't lose track of anything. The entire sound signature stays exactly the way it should. It just gets louder. Whereas it seems like, you know, these things kind of fold in on themselves and becomes more chaotic, and you have a harder time picking out individual instruments, the staging. And whereas this makes it bigger, bolder, more vivid. Hilarious that their marketing materials are like dead on to what I'm hearing with this thing. It's like on the old stereo amplifiers, you had like a loud switch, you know, and you which pretty much would just kind of like boost the bass and the treble or something like that. Well, I'm not saying that this boosts bass and treble, because it doesn't, but it gives you that sort of impression of like ultra vivid, realistic, like really in your face sound. I think that the stage on this, okay, well, in terms of the wideness, the stage on this is definitely as wide as you'd ever want. It's as wide as it needs to be. It's perfect. The depth on this is very good, but not quite as deep as the Muse, which, if you've ever heard a tube amp, they have this thing they do where the sort of the virtual room, the virtual soundscape you're listening to becomes like super real. It's like better than it even was in the recording, or some exaggerated, say. And for mixing and for reference things, you don't want that at all. You actually want to hear what you're putting into the mix. And this, so this is what I'm saying. It doesn't exaggerate anything. It's just all there where it should be, perfectly. The bass on this, extraordinarily controlled, extremely deep. No bloatiness, no tubbiness, none of that jazz. And also, honestly, like the Muse, the bass could possibly, it does edge into that area at some points. I think it's definitely a warmer type op amp, but it gets a little tubby, a little boaty. Like some music that just sounds great and just makes it more rich and creamy and whatever. But for reference style, we don't do that, you know. The Burson's definitely my go-to for reference by far. End of story. These TIs are just toys compared to this thing. That's like the best way I could put it. And I could say that, you know, for a while I had maybe a little bit of a hard time trying to figure out how can I pick out the differences on these things, because they are pretty minor, honestly. And so I ended up figuring out that simply turning my stuff up to like an unreal amount, just way too loud, helps me figure out those differences. I don't know why. Maybe that pushes the op amps to the edges of their capabilities, and then you really see the differences. It could be that, it could be perceptual. But yeah, I just I turn these suckers up, and then the differences seem to jump out more, especially. So what sounds good with the Burson? Everything. There's nothing that sounds bad with this at all. It's just, you know, as you would expect a reference type op amp or amplifier to give you exactly what you put into it. And I will say that, you know, these probably do that too, but they lack the musicality of the Burson. That's really the difference between that. So in terms of, would you want to buy the Burson? So, you know, it's a little bit of a hard thing to answer, because if you have a device like this, then you can't even put it in there, right? You'd have to like cut the edge off, or I don't know what, but it's not going to work. So, the Burson V6 is going to be very, very likely for a desktop setup amplifier. You might be able to DIY yourself into something that's a smaller package, but it's not ideal, as you can see. And by the way, I'll just do that so you can see this thing. Yeah. And then we'll pull this apart one more time. Just to give you an idea, and then we have the little sort of, this little indented thing that tells you the pin 1, which is this way on this. Yeah, just to go over that one more time. So cool. The question might be, well, what else are you going to do? You got a Burson, you got some TIs, you got the Muse, so what's next? So what's next is Spark OS. Spark OS amplifiers have a very good reputation for being high quality. These are also larger, you know, package op amps, so they can do more with them, put more components in there. So that's probably likely going to be my next buy. They're about $100, which is like, wow, that's a lot. It's just a lot. But another one would be, let me think, the Burson V5i. And that is a package which is much more similar to this. It's a, I believe it actually does have some components in it, but it just has a little metal shell over it. But basically, I believe if I stick it in here, it will fit, and I can put the cover on. So that would be a nice thing to try out. I think they're a little less than the V6, but definitely want to try that out, at least for portability on this unit. And then, so speaking of Burson, because this operational amplifier is just so good, it really is. It's such an improvement over the stock Texas Instruments thing that I feel like Burson really knows what they're doing with audio, and you know, not every company necessarily has magic in their stuff. So my next amplifier could very well be like as in a headphone amplifier. It could be a Burson. They got like a Burson Play, which is pretty interesting. So, anyways, wanted to go over that a little bit, and a lot of people are like, well, you know, and I should mention this, that swapping op amps is like this is an old school thing. A lot of new folks don't really do this or know about it. So I did want to bring it up, and I also wanted to bring up the fact that you can improve maybe your desktop amp by swapping some of these out. It's relatively simple, but the sonic benefits are actually very much. So like if I had to put a number on like how much better is the X Duo with the stock op amp versus with the Burson, and I would say that the value of this unit, which was like $260, just the audio quality goes up to a level that's more like, I'm thinking I would pay $400 or $500 for it, because that's what it sounds like. It sounds just wonderful. And oh, by the way, the background, the blackness, the noise levels on this are very good. I don't hear any noise on, certainly on low gain or medium gain. On high gain at like probably like 3/4. No. It's probably like nearly maxed. I could maybe hear a little bit, but I'm not even sure. It's really good. Probably saying something about the X Duo as well, but Yeah, so the noise levels on this are fantastic. Just great. Just great, great, great. Output impedance is, let's see, let me find my notes. It was 1.5 ohm in this configuration through this. So I guess I could say it's not as good as it could get. It's not bad. It's pretty good. Pretty good. You pretty much want your output impedance of your device to be less than, say, your headphones, right? So 1.5 ohm is like, well, I don't have any headphones that are anywhere close to that, so probably that makes some sense why I'm not hearing any noise. But maybe if you had like, I don't know, like a 5 ohm headphone, maybe there'd be some noise out of that depending on your device. But as is, this is great. Black background, inky, you know, pitch black. Excellent. So, highly recommended. Burson is awesome. You probably want to get this for your desktop amp versus mobile. Is it worth the $70? Absolutely. Or 70 or 80? Absolutely. We're talking about a really fairly large improvement in sound quality when it comes right down to it. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great one.